Matt Dietrich, thanks for joining us again on the Illinois channel. And as we are here nearing the end of September, a lot of people may think that the elections are rather far away, November 2020, but Illinois is going to have its primary coming up on St. Patrick's Day, an easy day to remember, March 17th. So we wanted to talk about right now what's going on with these campaigns. They're kind of subterranean for the general public. But one of the things is that I know they're doing is they're out having to get signatures to get their candidates on the ballot. So let's talk a little bit about that. What's involved in getting candidates on the ballot? How many different signatures for what kind of offices are we looking at?
It really ranges from office to office. If you're running for U.S. Senator, for example, statewide, you'll need 5,000 signatures. If you're running for the Illinois State Senate, you need 1,000. If you're running for an Illinois State Representative District, that's 500 signatures. However, if you're going to run for Congress, that's a bit different. And that goes by you need to get half of 1% of the total vote that your party's candidate received in your congressional district in the previous presidential election. So that's a little more complicated, which is why we publish a candidate's guide for every election where we give exact signature counts for things like that. And those numbers that I just gave you, those apply to the established parties, which in Illinois at the moment, that's only the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. There's a whole other process with a lot higher signature threshold for independent candidates and for new party candidates, for example, Libertarian Party or Green Party or any other party that's not currently established. They have a separate signature gathering period that comes after the primary, and they've got a whole different set of criteria for the number of signatures they have to gather.
As I recall, too, I mean, not to spend too much time on the third parties, but while you said if one was to run for statewide office, I think you said 5,000 signatures. I think it's like 25,000 for third parties, isn't it?
That's correct. It's 25,000 for a statewide office for an independent or a new party candidate. And that's basically the reason for that is they get to skip the primary. They're going directly on to the November general election ballot. And so that's kind of the trade-off there. They do have the higher signature threshold, but they don't have to run in a primary. And
we've had, like the Green Party some years back was on the ballot, I think maybe some others here and there. Once they're on, I guess whether you're Republican, Democrat, Green, or Conservative, every party has to get at least, 5% of the statewide total to remain automatically on the ballot. Otherwise, you got to go out and get those signatures again.
Once you're established in a gubernatorial year race, you're established for 4 years. So you are established for example, had any new party receive 5% of the statewide vote for governor in 2018, they would have been eligible for the primary ballot this time around and for the next time in 2022.
Now, the other thing is that then people who are going to be running have to officially declare their candidacy, right? And then they have reporting, they have to set up some kind of a committee. What are those kind of things? And I think, you can tell me if I'm wrong, that this all has to go with the fact that they're going to go out and start raising money, and those dollars have to be accounted for.
That's correct. If you raise or spend $5,000 in a year on your political campaign, or on there are other types of committees, but if you're a candidate and you're going to raise or spend $5,000 in a year, you are required to register a committee with us and do regular quarterly reporting, and in addition to that, any contributions of more than $1,000, you're required to report those within 5 business days, or if you're 30 days away from an election, you have to report those within 2 business days.
And how these days, given the internet, how do they report that? Just electronically, do they?
Almost all of them do it electronically. That's really the most convenient way. Some people still do it on paper.
Do you have forms? Does the State Board of Election have forms online that people like type in and fill out and send it, or do they just send you an email saying, Billy Bob sent me $1,000.
No, we have a whole system. We have a whole reporting system that they get a login for, and their campaign committee then can log in and report. For example, if they get contributions of more than 1,000, they can immediately log those in electronically. They submit their quarterly reports that way. It's a whole different system set up specifically for that purpose.
And how generally does that work? Does it work pretty well? Is it pretty efficient?
Well, it's pretty efficient, and we do get good compliance on it, but is also the safeguard that we watch and we see if people file late quarterly reports. We have a system where we can administer fines if they are, late and they don't, let's say, they allow a report just to go undone every day for 30 days. The penalty can build up to, I believe it's $5,000. And the real hammer that we have for making sure that candidates follow the reporting rules is that if you owe us money, if you have filed late reports and we find you and you don't pay them, you are not allowed to be on an election ballot. And for a lot of candidates who maybe, let's say you lost an election and then you just lost track of your reporting, you didn't know you had to keep doing it, and then all of a sudden you want to run for something else, then you find out, oh, I have all these fines that have been piling up and I just ignored it. You need to get that straightened out with us.
So if someone ran for governor and lost, or let's say Governor Rauner, following the candidate's lost election, is there a process also where they officially close down that?
Correct.
That what do we call it? A group?
Committee.
Committee.
Yeah.
That was raising money, and they say we're sending. I know some of the state lawmakers who have left will sometimes just donate their money. They can't use it themselves anymore, but they can donate their money. And some of them just do it right away just so that there's no more money left in their committee, and then they close it down. Right?
That's correct. There is a formal procedure for terminating your committee, and you're right. You have a choice. You can give whatever's remaining in your fund to charity. You can give it back to the contributors, only in amounts as they gave. You can't give contributors more than they initially gave. And so those are your options. But you do have to close down your committee, and if you don't do that, and this is where a lot of first-time candidates get into trouble, if you don't take that step and then you stop filing reports with us, you're going to start amassing fines, and if you ever plan on running for office again, that's going to come back to haunt you, and you're going to have to come back to us and file every report that you've missed. And it can be done, but it can be a real mess of paperwork for candidates. So we always encourage them, if you know that you're not going to be active anymore politically, take that step and formally close down your committee.
I wanted to follow up, but let me back up a little bit because I forgot when we were talking about getting signatures and we talked about the numbers. But often then, after those signatures are handed in, and again, when's the deadline on that?
Well, filing for the Democrats and Republicans this year starts November 25th and ends December 2nd.
So roughly a week or maybe something like that. If a lot of times those signatures, we'll see, Democrats come in and challenge Republican signatures and vice versa, trying to invalidate those, hopefully so that the person who is trying to get on the ballot gets kicked off is the point of it. What do people have to do when they're signing someone's petition to get on the ballot? How should it be done just to make sure it's validated and not going to be rejected?
When you sign a petition, if a candidate comes to your door and wants you to sign, make sure you are registered to vote. Make sure you are registered.
So let's stop there. If you're not registered, does that mean you can't sign their petition?
That is correct. That's correct. Unless if you're going to be registered by the time that they file, that's possible too. But when you sign someone's nominating petition, you are required to be a registered voter in that person's district where they're running. So if they're running for state representative in the 99th district, you need to live in the 99th district and vote in the 99th district to be eligible to sign their petition. And I would suggest that people, you're required to sign your signature. I would suggest you print the name as well so that it's legible if there's any question. But the big thing is make sure you're registered, and make sure you're registered in the district and at the address that you put down on that nominating paper, because this is one of the things that most commonly gets signatures disallowed, is that the voter is not registered in that district.
Now, that said, we have these committees. I think there are some committees that are also not for candidates but for causes. Is that right? I mean, like, you know, the committee to have pink bridges or whatever.
Correct. There are, well, there are several different committees. The most prominent of the, other than candidate committees, the most prominent would be independent expenditure committees. Those are committees that are formed in order to promote some issue or to support or oppose a specific candidate. The thing with independent expenditure committees, though, is they cannot coordinate with any of those candidates. You can buy all the advertising you want for candidate X, but you can't go to candidate X's office and coordinate with them on whatever, you know, if you want to pass out literature on their behalf.
So the governor is going to be trying to pass the progressive income tax. There's probably going to be a committee set up for that, for advertising, education, all that kind of thing. The governor's not a candidate. Is there any prohibition? I don't want to make it just about the governor, but just use something that people can think about that we know is going to come up. Does the governor have to stay away from that committee that's pushing for a progressive income tax, or does it not matter because he's not a candidate right now?
No, he could be involved in that, because that is not something that would be involved in, that wouldn't be an independent expenditure committee, first of all. That would be a committee dedicated to that constitutional amendment. So he could be involved in that, and he could fund it. And in fact, I believe Governor Rauner, when a couple of ballot initiatives were going on in previous elections for redistricting amendment, and there may have been another one that I'm blanking on now, but I believe Governor Rauner was involved in those while he was a candidate. So that's possible. That could be going on. And you'll have the other side doing the same as well, opposing that constitutional amendment.
So watch how you assign that. The other, we often hear too about two other issues I think concern people generically. More specifically, one is we've heard so much of late over the last 2 years about the Russian collusion and interference in our elections, whether it's Russia. You know, the fact of the matter is everyone knows we have a problem with cybersecurity. Everyone does, you know, getting their credit cards stolen and everything else. In general, let's not make it about Russia. It could be the Chinese, the North Vietnamese, anyone. How does the State Board of Elections, what do you do to secure the information that you handle so that we don't have, I think the big thing is that we don't have elections overturned by some spy in China making their favorite candidates count go up while the other guys go down. Right.
Now, this is one of the issues that really the public needs to be aware of when we talk about election security and cybersecurity. When we talk about cybersecurity, what we are talking about, and when I say we, I mean the election infrastructure throughout the country, you're talking about protecting voter registration information. And I know that probably a lot of people in Illinois are aware that in 2016, in the summer of 2016, the Illinois State Board of Elections had a data breach in which a hacker broke into the statewide voter registration database that we maintain here. Now, they were unable to change any information, and we very quickly fixed the problem, and we established a hotline with the Attorney General's office in case the 76,000 voters whose information had been viewed in case they noticed any suspicious activity with their personal information. No one did, and no one has since then. But what that did was it caused us to completely redo every system and every process by which we handle voter data from now on. We do think that we are now as secure as we can be. We always say you're just trying to stay a step ahead of the hackers. It's never a 100% guarantee, but that's when you talk about cybersecurity and the Russians, because as we know now, the Justice Department charged 12 Russian military officials with election interference, and one of them was blamed for the intrusion here. But that pertains to voter registration data. When they talk about election security in terms of casting votes, you're really not talking about remote hacking. The tabulators that you see in your precinct polling place, the touch screens, occasionally you'll have touch screen voting, which generates a paper ballot that we can inspect here in Illinois. Those are
Is
never
that true, by the way? I wanted to ask, are paper ballots, I have paper ballots where I vote, is that across the board in Illinois?
Well, if you don't have a paper ballot, you will have, if you vote on a touch screen, you will get a paper printout that shows how you voted. There's a paper backup for every single vote cast in Illinois. But the thing people have to remember is that none of the machinery that's used in the process of casting or tabulating votes is ever connected to the internet. It's not vulnerable to outside hacking. There are extremely remote scenarios where that could happen, but primarily when we talk about election security, we're talking about securing the actual vote and making sure that the tabulation is accurate.
Would I be right? I mean, I'm just taking the worst case scenario. So all these votes, if it's a statewide office, or even if it's not, if it's a congressional, let's say, office, all these votes are gathered somewhere and counted. Let's say that was hacked, where the data came together, not their individual voting ballot, but box, but you know, where they're gathered. If someone said, wait a minute, that just doesn't seem right to us, or our numbers out of our precinct were not what we thought they were, the point of this is you would have a paper trail that you could go back and do an audit on.
Well, and actually we do a 5% random retabulation with every election authority throughout the state after every election. So there is a 5% recount in effect where we make sure that the count was accurate. I think a lot of the things you're hearing now, there's the arguing in Washington over paper ballots doesn't really apply to Illinois, because Illinois has, for years, we've been one of the states that every vote has a paper trail. So if worse came to worse, we could run the election completely from scratch all over again based on the paper that we have.
Reminiscent of 2000 and counting the chads, right? Hanging chads in Florida.
That really was, the first time that we got a major influx of federal money was in 2004. Illinois got $140 million, and that's when the local election authorities replaced all their election equipment, got brand new, no more hanging chads, no more punch cards. So what's going on now in Washington, and where we've been involved too, is we would like, and we have 108 local election authorities in Illinois who would like to replace their tabulators and all of their voting equipment because it's old. Yeah. It breaks down, and if you have
computerized, and if it's now 15 years old, right, that's old.
And when you cast your vote, say on a paper ballot, and you feed it into that tabulator, there's a motor that takes that in. Those things break. They're obsolete. It's hard to get parts for them now. And when they break, that's when you get lines building up at precincts, and that's when people wonder, what's going on here? What we've heard throughout the whole Russian issue is that the goal behind everything, whether it was meddling in social media or trying to break into state election authorities and other government systems, is the goal was to undermine the confidence of Americans in the voting process. And if you have lines building up at precincts because some tabulator's broken and a county clerk is scrambling to keep that precinct up and running, that, that does not instill a lot of confidence from the people who are standing in line. So that's what we want to avoid.
And what you brought up was an area I was going to ask. So you got $140 million Illinois did, and other states did, to update it. And I was going to ask, is there an annual or every election cycle, does the State Board of Elections get any money from the feds, or was that just a one-time shot?
Well, it's not a one-time shot. In 2018, we received $13.2 million, and we've put that toward cybersecurity. And we've put that actually toward all of the work that we did here for the last 3 years following our data breach. We want to make sure that none of the local election authorities ever go through that. So we've put all of our federal money into a program we call the Illinois Cyber Navigator Program, which sends grants, and we've hired staff to go into the local offices and do risk assessments to make sure that that they have good cybersecurity and good cybersecurity practices. Now, just last week, we heard from Mitch McConnell in Washington that he had signed on to $250 million for the states.
The states total,
Right,
so roughly $50 million each.
So we,
not that it would go out that way.
right. So the $250 million, if it gets distributed the same way, would be about $8.75 million for Illinois. That's a far cry from the $140 million we got in 2004. We've estimated that, and our executive director was in Washington talking to a House subcommittee over the winter, and we estimate that it would take $175 million for Illinois now to do the same thing we did in 2000.
Did you say we're getting 8 or 80?
We would get this time around 8.75.
It really doesn't seem like very much.
Well, it's not enough to replace voting machines the way on a grand scale like we did in '04, but it's a good supplement if you're implementing cybersecurity, because cybersecurity does not involve a whole lot of purchasing. A lot of cybersecurity measures involve training people. Don't open up phishing emails, for example. That's one of the problems that's happened with a lot of the ransomware attacks that have happened across the country. And the equipment purchases tend to be not like huge election system purchases where it's going to cost a county $1 million. It's a lot smaller. So, we're thankful for that money. If it comes our way, we'll put it to good use.
How is your funding? The State Board of Elections, like everyone else, gets some money from the state, or probably, I would guess, the majority of your money, I would guess, from the state. And when we weren't passing budgets and all, I mean, how is your funding situation now? Are you adequately funding? Everyone always says they need more money, but are you in a crisis mode or kind of operating okay at the moment?
No, crisis mode ended when the state passed a budget back in the summer of 2017. Now, for the 2.5 years before then, that was a problematic time because you don't have a budget. We had a situation here where vendors would not sell to us, for example, for software, security software, to renew our licenses, and that became a problem. That's not a problem anymore, and I think we've never had a problem with the General Assembly questioning our budget requests or not giving us adequate resources to do what we need to do.
We've already gone longer than I anticipated, but let me ask just in closing out, there's a lot of information on your website, so tell us, A, what your website is, and just tell us some of the information if people wanted to look up various pieces of information, what could they find there? Elections.il.gov,
that's our website. If you go there, the number one use for that site is if you're a voter and you want to register to vote, or if you want to check to see if you are already registered, go there, elections.il.gov. First thing you'll see on the screen is voter information, and you can, with one click, go through that process. But you can also look up campaign finance information. You can search candidates and see how much they have in their committees. You can find out who's been giving money to them. Where are they spending that money? You can do expenditure searches. If you are curious about what are the significant dates going on, when do candidates file for office, when's the primary, when do I need to register by, what happens on certain dates, we have an election calendar there. All kinds of information, really anything about elections you can find by searching that site.
Can someone look to see how you voted in an election?
Nope, you cannot do that, although in Illinois, a voter's voting history, whether you have voted or not, and if you have voted in a primary and which party's ballot you took, that is public information, not available through us unless you come into our office, and by state law we're required to make our voter list available to the public in our Springfield office only. But that's information that if you went down to your county clerk's office, they are required by state law to make it available for inspection, so you can inspect those records as well.
Matt Dietrich, we appreciate you taking the time, and hopefully people will know more than they did before they start watching this program. And if there's anything else, maybe we can come back and do some more information gathering with you about the process. Good luck as we enter the election season.
Thank you, Terry, and I hope everybody gets out there and gets registered, get online, get registered, and get out and vote.
Thanks for watching, and if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to our channel. And while you're at it, please leave us a comment. Thank you for watching.